Friends, today I'm going to share with you a thought-provoking story about a devout elder's daughter who was also a Hafiza of the Quran. Despite being deeply religious, she committed a sin so grave that upon her death, she had to be buried with a mobile phone. This incident left everyone in shock. What sin could she have committed to warrant such a consequence? To know the full story, you must read it till the end. So let us begin. It is said that in a village lived a devout man named Abdul-Jabbar. He was an honest and God-fearing person. Abdul-Jabbar's father had arranged his marriage with the daughter of his friend. 2 years had passed since their marriage, but they had no children, which caused Abdul-Jabbar much distress. Finally, after fervent prayers, Allah blessed him with a daughter, whom he named Nimrah. Abdul-Jabbar was overjoyed and loved his daughter dearly. As Nimrah grew, Abdul-Jabbar doted on her. One day when Nimrah was still young, Abdul-Jabbar came home to find her listening to music on a mobile phone. This angered him greatly. However, his wife, Farzana, defended Nimrah, saying, "She's just a child. She'll grow out of it as she gets older." With his wife's intervention, Abdul-Jabbar reluctantly let it go. But over time, Nimrah grew bolder and started using the phone openly, without any fear of her father. She knew that if her father scolded or reprimanded her, her mother would protect her. This emboldened her, and she spent most of her time engrossed in her mother's phone, even after coming home from school. One Friday when Abdul-Jabbar was home, he heard music playing during the call to prayer for Friday prayers. Exclaiming, "Astaghfirullah," he got up angrily and went to his daughter Nimrah. In his anger, he slapped her and explained the importance of respecting Friday and refraining from sinful acts. Nimrah started crying. Farzana was furious with Abdul-Jabbar, arguing, "What have you done? She's just a child. How can she understand?" But Abdul-Jabbar scolded his wife too, warning her that they would regret it if Nimrah didn't change as she grew older. Yet Farzana remained indifferent. Frustrated, Abdul-Jabbar went to his friend Shakur's house. Seeing Abdul-Jabbar upset, Shakur inquired about the reason. Abdul-Jabbar vented his frustration, explaining that his young daughter had developed an addiction to mobile phones and spent all her time on them. Shakur advised him, "The more you try to keep her away from the phone, the more curious she will become about it. Instead, buy her a phone yourself, but monitor her usage. Make her promise not to misuse it. No songs, no inappropriate activities. Gain her trust, or else she might hide things from you and rebel further." Taking his friend's advice, Abdul-Jabbar went home, took out 30,000 rupees he had saved for household expenses, and purchased a mobile phone for Nimrah. He was determined to win back her trust. When he returned home, he searched for Nimrah, but his wife told him, "After you scolded her, she cried herself to sleep. And now you want to see her?" Abdul-Jabbar showed his wife the phone he had bought for Nimrah. Farzana, seeing this, was deeply worried and said, "What are you doing? Just a moment ago, you were so angry and insisted that the phone be taken away from her, and now you've brought her a phone yourself? What do you actually want?" Abdul-Jabbar's wife protested. Abdul-Jabbar explained patiently, "Look, I've realized that the more we keep Nimrah away from the phone, the more curious she will become and get drawn toward it. I've decided we need to guide her, which is why I bought this phone. But now you must ensure that Nimrah doesn't listen to songs or misuse it. She'll only use the phone for 1 hour a day." That evening, when Nimrah woke up, Abdul-Jabbar immediately went to her and showed her the phone. "Look what I got for you," he said. Nimrah's eyes lit up with joy as she saw the box. "I knew you'd fulfill my wish," she exclaimed, quickly opening the box to take out the phone. Abdul-Jabbar then went to his wife and said, "I have to go to Dubai for work for 3 months. You'll need to look after Nimrah in my absence." His wife nodded. Nimrah was thrilled because all her school friends had phones, and now she finally had one too. Before she would borrow her mother's phone, but now she had her own. After Abdul-Jabbar left for Dubai, Nimrah's behavior started to worsen. With the phone in her hand, she became rude and defiant. She refused to help around the house and spent all her time on the phone, lying in bed after school. Her mother assumed Nimrah wasn't listening to music because the house was quiet, but she didn't know that Nimrah had used her pocket money to buy headphones. Now Nimrah spent her days and nights listening to songs on her phone. When her mother called her for meals, she would rudely respond, "I'm not hungry." Time passed this way. When Abdul-Jabbar returned home, he was relieved to see peace in the house and assumed Nimrah had reformed. But when Nimrah's matriculation results came, she had failed. Her parents were devastated. Abdul-Jabbar decided to enroll Nimrah in a Quran memorization program. Nimrah started the program reluctantly. She was intelligent and completed her hifz in 2 years. But her behavior didn't improve because she had done it under parental pressure, not willingly. She continued listening to songs and secretly started recording videos, uploading them on social media. Her parents were unaware. Meanwhile, Abdul-Jabbar worked tirelessly in Dubai to save money for Nimrah's wedding. Back home, Nimrah was secretly gaining fame on social media, becoming a sensation with thousands of fans. This newfound popularity made her arrogant, and she no longer respected her mother. She believed she was adored by the world. One day, she began chatting with a boy online. Their conversations soon escalated, and Nimrah started sharing her videos with him. The boy began demanding more videos. When Nimrah refused, he threatened to show her earlier videos to her father. Terrified, Nimrah blocked him, but the boy followed through on his threat and spread her videos online. Abdul-Jabbar returned from Dubai and met his wife and daughter. Nimrah was visibly anxious, dreading the moment her videos would be exposed. She couldn't bring herself to confess to her father, but she still hadn't learned her lesson. One day, someone showed Abdul-Jabbar one of Nimrah's videos. The shock was too much for him to bear, and he suffered a heart attack on the spot, passing away immediately. After her father's death, Nimrah's behavior deteriorated further. With no one left to fear, she believed she could do whatever she wanted. When Abdul-Jabbar's wife asked the doctor about her husband's sudden death, the truth was clear to Nimrah. Her father had seen the video that had exposed her shame. She remained silent, carrying the burden of her guilt. The doctor informed her that her husband had suffered a deep shock. Nimrah knew in her heart that her father had likely seen her video. She kept this secret buried within herself. Nimrah's mother wished to step out and work to provide for her daughter, but Nimrah decided she would take up a job instead. One day she informed her mother that she had found a job. Her mother, alarmed, asked, "How could you get a job? You didn't even complete your studies." Nimrah, however, didn't provide any details and retorted angrily, "You can't talk to me like this anymore. You didn't let me study just so I couldn't work. Now that I've got a job, it's bothering you." Nimrah continued to speak harshly to her mother and treated her with contempt. She didn't tell her mother anything about the nature of her job because she knew her mother wouldn't approve. One night, Nimrah came home late, and her mother stood by the door watching her. The women in the village often questioned Nimrah's mother about what kind of job her daughter did that kept her out so late at night. At first, Nimrah's mother tried to brush off their questions, but her patience was wearing thin. She confronted Nimrah strictly, but by then, Nimrah was beyond control. She no longer even cared to dress modestly, something she had done out of fear of her father. One day, Nimrah's mother fell seriously ill. She had forgotten to take her medicine. The next morning, she fainted. When Nimrah saw her unconscious mother, she panicked, but couldn't decide whether to take her to the doctor or go to her job. Prioritizing her job, she left her mother at home and went out. A neighbor, seeing Nimrah's mother unconscious, rushed her to a local healer for treatment. The village women asked Nimrah's mother about Nimrah's whereabouts, and she made several excuses. The next day, when Nimrah returned home, her mother expressed her disappointment. "Daughter, what you did was not right. What have I done to deserve this kind of treatment from you?" Nimrah responded by pushing her mother, causing her to fall face first. A neighbor who had come to bring food for Nimrah's mother found her lying near the door, her lips bruised and her chin injured. The neighbor, deeply hurt, helped Nimrah's mother up and brought her inside. There, she saw Nimrah, dressed in skimpy clothes, wearing makeup, and recording a video. The neighbor scolded Nimrah harshly, saying, "A person would rather die childless than have a daughter like you. First, your father passed away because of your actions, and now you'll soon kill your poor mother." Instead of feeling remorse, Nimrah started shouting at the neighbor, saying, "Even if my mother dies, don't you dare lift her body." Nimrah's mother, deeply saddened by her daughter's behavior, said to the neighbor, "Najma, thank you for looking after me. I feel ashamed because of this daughter of mine." Najma nodded in agreement and left, knowing that disobedient children are a curse upon their parents, making their lives miserable. By now, the neighbors had begun to suspect the kind of life Nimra was leading. But Nimra had become shameless, and nothing seemed to affect her anymore. Days passed quickly. Nimra's mother tried to counsel her lovingly, but Nimra would retort, "Mother, this is my life. Don't interfere. I'll do what I think is best." In recent days, Nimra's behavior had become increasingly strange. She spent hours locked in her room and had started mingling with people outside the house. Her mother, though heartbroken, prayed silently for her daughter's guidance, but it seemed too late. Nimra had been talking to a boy for months, and their conversations had led to meetings. The boy had lured her with promises of fame, claiming he would make her an overnight star. Under the pretense of modeling, Nimra had done several photo shoots wearing inappropriate clothing. She eventually fell for his sweet talk and began spending private time with him. What initially seemed like love gradually turned into exploitation. The boy, Farhan, began taking Nimra to meet other people under the pretense of helping her find work. These individuals entrapped her in such a way that she believed she would soon become the top model in the country, showered with wealth day and night. She was unaware that her downfall had already begun. One day, she started feeling unwell and immediately contacted Farhan. He laughed and said, "Darling, don't worry about these things. Come to me, and I'll take you to a doctor." When she visited the doctor with Farhan, she discovered she was pregnant. Farhan sat there casually, as if it was no big deal. The doctor prescribed her some medicine and told her to return at the scheduled time. For the first time, Nimra felt that something was terribly wrong. Quietly, she returned to Farhan's flat. In their solitude, she told him, "Farhan, I don't feel good about this. You should marry me. After all, you promised me marriage when we were in a relationship." Farhan dismissed her concerns and said, "Baby, in showbiz, if a heroine or model is married, her demand drops. I want to build your career. We can't get married right now. Later, when you want, I'll marry you because I truly love you. For now, this child is an obstacle in our path. If you get caught up in this mess, you'll lose the luxurious cars and wealth you've been enjoying." Nimra was conflicted, but found Farhan's arguments convincing. She silently took the medicine and went home. Her mother noticed a white car dropping her off and picking her up regularly. By now, the neighbors had also pieced together what kind of life Nimra was leading. Out of respect for her late father, they refrained from taking any drastic action, but they were clear that they didn't want her influence around their daughters. One night, Nimra came home, set food on the table for her mother, and locked herself in her room. When her health started deteriorating again, she called Farhan. Her mother, Farzana, couldn't ignore her daughter's condition. For the first time, she tried to confront Nimra physically, but Nimra threatened her mother fiercely, warning her to forget the fact that she's your mother. Farzana stood in shock, recalling how she had begged God for the blessing of a child and fulfilled all of Nimra's desires to ensure she never felt deprived. This was the reward she now received. Farzana, deeply hurt, broke down in tears and cursed Nimra, saying, "It would have been better if I had remained childless. If you were going to disgrace your father's grave like this, it would have been better if you had died." Nimra, overwhelmed by her pain, called Farhan, who arrived shortly after and took her to the hospital in front of Farzana. Nimra stayed away from home for 2 days. Farhan took her directly to his flat from the hospital. When Nimra returned home after several days, her mother refused to speak to her. Nimra, unbothered, went about her life, retreating to her room and leaving some money on the table before heading out. Meanwhile, Farhan began pressuring her to please important people in exchange for money, keeping the larger share for himself while giving her the remainder. This enraged Nimra, and she retorted, "You haven't even managed to get me a commercial, and now you're asking me to stoop to this? If I must trade my dignity, I want fame in return, not just money." Their arguments escalated, and Farhan decided to show Nimra her worth. Farhan, often intoxicated, found a perfect victim in Nimra, who had also dabbled in various substances. During one heated exchange, Farhan physically assaulted Nimra. She lost her temper and attacked him in return, thinking she could intimidate him just as she silenced her mother. But this time, things were different. Farhan wasn't alone. He had a whole network of people who exploited girls like Nimra, using them for their purposes. As Nimra tried to leave the flat in anger after being beaten, Farhan restrained her, tied her up, and threw her photos and videos in front of her. He sneered. The first scandal might have been swept under the rug, but this time it will be so massive that you'll be infamous not just in Pakistan, but internationally. She had already earned significant money by exposing herself on various online platforms. But it was a huge shock to her when she realized that every moment of her private life had been secretly recorded. Nimra screamed and cried, but her pleas had no effect on Farhan. A group of people from Dubai who had paid a hefty amount after watching her videos was arriving. These were wealthy sheikhs, and thus Nimra's journey from being a Hafiza of the Quran to a morally corrupt girl was complete. When Nimra resisted, these men subjected her to violence and abuse for days. Perhaps due to excessive drug use, Nimra lost her life. Panicked, Farhan didn't know what to do. His boss had strong connections with the police, but the situation had escalated too far. Nimra was dead. To cover up the incident, Farhan tied her body in a sack and dumped it at a garbage site. Her body lay there for 3 days until the stench forced local residents to investigate the suspicious sack. When they opened it, they immediately informed the police, who retrieved her remains. When Nimra's photograph was published in the newspapers, someone informed her devastated mother, Farzana, that her daughter's body was at the morgue. The entire neighborhood mourned the cruelty Nimra had suffered, but Farzana remained silent. When Nimra's body was brought home, its condition was so horrifying that everyone present repented and sought forgiveness from God. Farzana's heart was shattered. Preparations for the funeral began as quickly as possible, and her body was washed for burial. However, the young men digging Nimra's grave encountered strange difficulties. Every time they attempted to dig, something unusual would happen, prompting them to seek the guidance of the local imam. The imam suggested that perhaps this was her destiny, and they decided to proceed despite the challenges. When Nimra's body was lifted for burial, it became so unbearably heavy that even the strongest men in the neighborhood couldn't carry it. They tried repeatedly, but the result was the same. Bewildered, the neighbors asked the imam what to do. He remarked, "There must be some sin associated with this girl preventing her burial. Until that matter is resolved, the body won't be lifted." Farzana, who had been silently observing, realized what the issue was. The cause of her daughter's downfall was clear: her mobile phone. It was the root of all her sins and the beginning of her destruction. God knows what kinds of sins she had committed through that phone, but now even her burial was being hindered by it. Farzana quietly informed the imam about the phone. The imam, after contemplating, said, "All right, let's try placing the phone with her body. If the body becomes liftable, then this phone must be the reason for her torment, and it should be buried with her." As soon as the phone was placed beside her body, it became easy to lift, and Nimra was finally laid to rest with her phone in the grave. Many people who witnessed this repented and learned a valuable lesson. The misuse of a mobile phone had brought such torment upon a Hafiza of the Quran. Even after burial, Nimra would appear in her mother's dreams, screaming, crying, and pleading for help. Farzana continued to pray for her forgiveness. This story serves as a lesson for young boys and girls who misuse mobile phones in isolation, engage in bad company, and ultimately disgrace themselves and their parents.